OK, it's halfway through the second week of the campaign and it's all gloves off and aggression in the campaign now. A noticeable change in Labor's strategy. Not much change from the coalition, but a dramatic shift from Labor. After all of Albo's mistakes, they've decided to yell and shout and attack. No longer the gentler, kinder Labor leader presented as a safe and likeable alternative to Scott Morrison. Now it's Shouty Albo.
This election is about whether we have a government that looks after people or whether we have Scott Morrison who goes missing unless there's a photo op, unless there's a campaign.
And it's not just the leader now. He's surrounding himself with a praetorian guard of frontbenchers. Sometimes they're stepping in to take the tricky questions for him.
Doubling the fines for thuggish unions and officials. What's your position on that? Think it's a good idea? Would you support it?
Berkey. It's no surprise.
Way to go, Berkey. And these frontbenchers, who hadn't been seen so much before in the campaign, they've clearly been told to show plenty of aggression too.
Low wages haven't been an accident. The government made clear low wages are a deliberate design feature of their management of the economy.
These are Anne Rutten because the government thinks that the age pension is welfare. Understand this.
This is the worst foreign policy blunder Australia has seen in the Pacific since the end of World War II.
Penny Wong, of course, not so shouty, but a wild call there on Solomon Islands. This is a deadly serious issue. We've covered it on the show previously, as you know, with the Pacific nation now inking a security deal with China. Still, given we've had coups in Fiji, how many now? Civil war in Bougainville, a virtual civil war previously in the Solomons that we went over to sort out, French nuclear test, the sinking of the Rainbow Warrior, God knows what else. It's difficult to say this foreign policy problem right now is the worst in the Pacific for 77 years. And it's an even bigger stretch to blame the actions of an independent sovereign government, no doubt a corrupted one at that, on Canberra.
We keep reinforcing to all of our Pacific family that Australia will always be there for you in your interests. And that is what we believe will ultimately prevail. Now, there are lots of pressures, and we're not dismissing those. I mean, when Anthony Albanese was asked about this, he thought this issue was about, he said, it was only three things: climate change, and climate change. That's a nonsense. China has the biggest emissions and growing emissions in the world. So they might have just woken up to the issue. They've been highly critical of our government and me and the strong stand that I've taken against China. But what these issues highlight is the risk, the uncertainty, and the fact that you need to be constant in your relations with all these Pacific countries.
Yeah, tough issue in the Pacific. Sure, Australia would have liked to not to have happened, and now we'll try to have it repaired or undone. But if Labor wants to go hard with an improbable attack about the Solomon Islands, well, the thing is then it leads to the China threat. The issue is all about China and standing up to China then, and that's a government strength and, of course, another Labor weakness. And that's where this game of competing scare campaigns gets interesting. Because, of course, negativity is crucial in this campaign. Of course, heightening fear about the alternatives is a big part of both campaigns. But it's all about plausibility, isn't it? So when Labor tries to run lines and ads saying that the coalition will destroy Medicare, they run hard up against the facts. Medicare has been broadened and strengthened over the past decade. It's the same on IR or on debt or even on cuts to crucial services. Labor is having to argue against reality. They're saying, forget what the coalition has done over the previous 3 terms, they'll now do all sorts of nasty stuff if they stick around. Just doesn't pass the pub test, does it? The government, on the other hand, their scare campaigns on something like border protection, well, they're pointing out that Labor is making similar promises to the ones they made in 2007, when we saw what they did, and it was disastrous. That's why Labor has such trouble understanding its own policies.
Do you remain committed to Operation Sovereign Borders, and if so, do you support the retention of temporary protection visas?
Yes. Earlier on, I heard half the question and didn't hear all of it. Labor's policy is to support Operation Sovereign Borders. We support offshore processing. We support resettlement in third countries. We don't support temporary protection visas. Thanks. Labor supports turning back boats where it's safe to do so, the same policy, exactly the same policy as the government.
Yeah, except without temporary protection visas, as I mentioned the other day. And the difference is that the government has implemented those policies. Until now, Labor's only opposed them. Under Howard and then again during this government, the coalition turned back dozens of boats. Labor never turned back a single boat. Albanese said he couldn't. Labor argued it was impossible. And Kevin Rudd said it had started conflict with Indonesia. So the coalition's scare is to say, look at what Labor has said and done. They'll probably do it again. That's a scare campaign, sure, but it's based on reality. It's plausible. Whereas Labor tries to argue that after 9 years, the coalition will finally go with an evil secret agenda they've resisted till now. It's a stretch, isn't it? And it goes to show just how much pressure is on Labor. As I said last night, that Newspoll was not good news for them. It must scare them about where the trend is taking the voting intentions in this country. And this puts enormous pressure on Anthony Albanese for the Leaders' debate here on Sky News tonight. He can't afford another error. He can't afford a major gaffe. What's more, he probably needs to land a blow or two. And it's most important, he needs to come across as a calm and plausible alternative Prime Minister, not Mr Shouty. Imagine his nerves as he goes through final rehearsals and wargaming this afternoon.
My approach is not to lock myself away in rooms before having these things. Look, I think tonight is a really good opportunity for people to evaluate the choice.
Well, he's pretty relaxed, and I don't think he needs a lot of encouragement from me. He's looking forward to it. He's got the right attitude to it, the right approach to it. Big opportunity to lay out a better future and an alternative.
Yeah, so that's 7 o'clock Eastern here on Sky, hosted by Kieran Gilbert in Brisbane. Be there or be square. I'll be on with Paul Murray afterwards to share my assessment.